Good morning, and thank you for joining this webinar in September, part of our year-long series to help you deepen your stewardship formation and prepare for your fundraising campaigns this year. As most of us in the Episcopal world start our campaigns in October and November, we really hope that this session can help you raise the questions that need answering, and maybe we'll answer a few of them in our presentation as well. We want to get you as ready as we can to launch your fundraising campaign this year. My name is Davey Gerhard, and I have the pleasure of serving TENS, the Episcopal Network for Stewardship, as its executive director. I've been on staff now for about a year and a half, and it has been a joy to meet so many of you. See a lot of familiar faces on today's presentation. I'm so happy that you're here, and I'm so happy that we've had a chance to work together for a while now on getting this information out. The things that we'll be talking about today are learning objectives. We're going to talk a little bit about our partnership with Tithely. I want you to know that we do have a great relationship with one of the best providers of fundraising software for churches. It is a great discount for you, and so we'll be going over that a little bit today. I want to talk about our theme for the year, Every Perfect Gift, and talk about how we are using that as a model for our pledge campaign, and you could use that as a model for how you roll out your stewardship this year. We're going to talk a little bit and review some ideas on how to talk about money and faith, particularly as we are still living in the pandemic. I think last year we thought we'd be out of it by now, but the news keeps telling us we are not. So let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we are facing and how we can still talk about money and help people to feel inspired to make their best gift. Finally, we will be talking about specifically how to use the TENS resources for this year, our Every Perfect Gift campaign, how to use those resources and implement them this year in your fundraising. Our theme this year comes from James 1:17. Every generous act of giving with every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. I love this idea that it's the relationship between gratitude for all we have received and the opportunity for generosity in giving back to our church and to our world and to our neighborhoods. This is the work of the church, and it's our work in mission. And it all starts with this gratitude. Our generosity comes from the fact that we have been loved and we have been provided with so much. You'll notice that we have, as in our materials this year, we use the chrysalis and the butterfly as a metaphor for the transformational work that our gifts have. When we receive our gifts and they are given to us and we build them within ourselves, they are then transformed through love and through generosity to be then able to be shared with the whole world. And this is really what our stewardship is about. It's about that transformation. I love that in ancient Greek, and to the ancient Greeks, the word for butterfly is the same as the word for spirit, psyche. And this reminds us that in Greek philosophy and perhaps in our own thinking, that metamorphosis, that thing that transforms caterpillar into butterfly, the idea of the spirit taking flight, of unlocking that inner gift so that the world can see it. This is what our gifts do for us. And that's why we based our campaign materials on that theme this year. As you move into your pledge campaign this year, I invite you to think about these 4 best practices. How are you going to implement online tools uh, to make certain that people can make their gift wherever they are and however they're able to connect with your community? Our doors are opening again and our churches are starting to fill up, but not everyone is coming back into church yet. Some folks are still looking at church through screens, and we need to appreciate that. So I hope that you can and have already implemented some tools to have online giving be a part of your campaign this year. Earlier in the year, we ran a webinar called Virtual Stewardship 201. And the year before, we ran Virtual Stewardship 101. You can find both of those on our website. They walk you through the reasons, the process for creating digital fundraising options in your community. And they really talk through the different options. There are lots of platforms that you can use. Some of them are very inexpensive, some of them are not. And so we want you to be fully informed. We've given you in those webinars, which you can find on our website, we've given you some really good options there to see how the different programs stack up. I mentioned earlier that we have a relationship with Tithely. Tithely is a provider of fundraising software in churches that work in both Canada and the United States. And what TENS members get is a lovely discount on the transaction cost that the provider takes from a gift. So it's 2.9% if you don't have the TENS discount, and it's 2.75% if you do. And I know that sounds like shaving off a little bit, but over time, that really makes a difference for a congregation. And that's more money that can go into your mission. So you just find that on our website, tens.org, and in the About Us, you'll see a whole section on discounts from Tithely. Take a look at it, and if it works for your congregation, you'll get a lovely discount just by being a member and a friend of TENS. We want you to make sure that you connect with your congregation this year. And normally, in normal years on stewardship campaigns, when our congregations are present in church, we're able to make announcements. We're able to see each other in the line at the back of the church and make sure that everybody has that connection and understands that we're running a campaign. Well, this year it might be a little different. We might have to look at all of our options, our social media channels, our newsletters, emails that you might send out, and of course, announcements when you can from the chancel steps, to make certain that everybody understands that we're doing a campaign this year, that things are happening, and use this to build up the hype, get people excited about it. Connect, connect, connect. It's the way we keep ourselves in relationship. Relationship is so essential to stewardship. And this is one of the things that I've found throughout this year as we've been talking with congregations about the work of stewardship, is that not only do stewardship campaigns and pledge campaigns raise money, that's one of their goals, and increase awareness of how our time and our talent can be used in our congregations, but it's a chance for us to share stories. The most powerful parts of stewardship campaigns that I've ever seen are when members provide their testimonials. Why do I support this church? What made this church my home? What makes it feel right? Why do I keep coming back? Why am I able to invest my time, talent, and treasure here versus another place in another city or in another community? When we tell these stories, we unlock that passion for our own mission with each other. And sharing those relationships is, I would argue, as important as the money we raise in our campaigns, because these moments connect us and feed us through the year. Please make sure that you contact everyone this year. Everyone needs to know that you're running a campaign. So give them some opportunities in large groups, in small groups, whether you're meeting in person or virtually. If you're doing a phone conversation, if you're doing some small group meetings, dinner churches, house church, whatever you're doing to break down the message and connect with people peer to peer, it's really important that we do that this year. So please do the contacting in our campaigns. I recommend that we not just send a single letter or have a single message go out, but that we increase the number of opportunities to connect with people about our campaign so that they really understand that this is the year we're doing things differently. This is the year we need people to pay attention. Finally, I think pledge campaigns give us the opportunity for reflection, because we're talking so much about our mission and our purpose and our work in the world. It's a beautiful opportunity to reflect on what the gospel calls us to do and how we stay in relationship with each other. We'll talk at in the second half of today's presentation about the weekly reflections that are a part of the TENS materials for your campaign this year. And the weekly reflections take the gospel and they, or the lectionary for the day. Sometimes the gospel isn't the one we pick, but it's one of the other readings. And it breaks open some stewardship themes within it. These reflection pieces are wonderful opportunities to make the connection with stewardship. And then they all provide 2 or 3 reflection questions that can be asked of the individual or in a small group setting. You could have a conversation about it. They could be teaching tools about stewardship and formation in your community. So the reflection is a really important part of this 4th step in implementing a campaign this year. Just a reminder about virtual stewardship. As we said before, every congregation should have the ability to collect donations and make pledges online and via mobile platforms. This is essential. It's no longer usual for individuals to carry cash. More and more of us are using our debit cards, our phones, other ways that we pay for things. For example, if I were to be a visitor in your church and imagining a time in which a plate might be passed in front of me again, you'd get very little from me because I don't carry a whole lot of cash. I use my debit card for almost everything, or I tap my phone on things to make payments. And so that's increasingly familiar and popular in our culture. And so we need to have ways for people to make gifts online. Another great benefit of online giving is that the receipts or the thank yous are automatic. You can automate those to go out as soon as the gift is received, so that it's an additional touch when people make a gift. There's a rule in fundraising, and I think it applies in our congregations as well, that you should thank someone 7 times for a gift that they make. And that comes, through the formal channels, notes or tax receipts or things like that. And then all of the other ways that we thank people through conversation, through gratitude, through recognition. These are really important tools in how we remind people that we are grateful for their time, talent, and treasure. A lot of our communities think that online giving is just for our younger generations, right? That not everybody is online and not everybody is doing this. And so maybe it's not worth the effort to implement online giving. And if your congregation is one of those, if your vestry or your finance committee is holding off on it, I want to share a couple of statistics with you to help maybe change your mind on that. These come from a 2019 study on the Lake Institute of Faith and Giving. The Lake Institute is an incredible organization that is funded through the Lilly School of Philanthropy out of Indiana University. It's a lot of affiliations. But what it means is this ecumenical, very dedicated group of folks spend a lot of time looking at data, science, and practice in fundraising in faith-based communities. And they have a lot of knowledge. You can go on their website, download all kinds of great tools, studies. They have webinars that are really important. Take a look at them. Some of the statistics that I quote now are particularly helpful when we talk about virtual stewardship campaigns. So it's not just millennials and Gen Z who are giving online. People, Gen X, the 40 to 59 age group, are the largest group of online donors right now. So those are your families right in their prime earning years, raising families, very active in your congregation. They are making the most number of online gifts of any of the generations that are making gifts right now. And so it's not just for our youngest folks. In the last 2 years, almost 10% increase in faith-based giving online. So this is saying that churches are adopting this more and more. And the more we get on board with that, the more your church gets on board with that, the more opportunity people will have to make gifts online. Now, as I said, this is from a 2019 study pre-pandemic, and we learned then that 59% of donors 66 and above have made gifts online. That was already a high statistic for a demographic that we usually dismiss as being online donor savvy, but we can't anymore. We shouldn't have then, and we certainly can't any longer, because in 2021, this number has gone from 59% to 81%. 81% of people 66 and above have made gifts to their church online. This is a really important statistic, and we need to remember that more and more folks are comfortable with this. And so if we give them the opportunity, they'll make it happen. For many of our congregations, online giving has been what sustained them through the pandemic. So we want every congregation to be able to do this. You're leaving money on the table if you don't have a way for people to make an online gift. There's no reason to limit the number of platforms or methods for giving. You should only limit them based on the number that you can keep track of. They do take a little accounting. Your parish administrator or your treasurer has to reconcile those reports every month. But as many of the options as you can, you should consider. PayPal, Tithely, Vanco. There are lots of great opportunities and options out there. So implement the ones that make sense to you. This is called donor-centric giving. I think we are past the point in the Episcopal Church when we can safely say that we'll accept your check or your cash, and we like it in an envelope and it can go in a plate. We are at a point now where we need to increase the options that people have to give, make their gifts online. Donor-centric giving means that we put those kinds of considerations first. How easy do we make it for people to give us money? Don't leave these options unexplored, because it will impact your giving. Fundraising campaigns aren't the only ways that we make money in our congregations, especially at the end of the year and especially for outreach. I know that a lot of congregations do event-based fundraising. Last year, TENS did an entire webinar on virtual events and event-based fundraising, and we gave you a whole bunch of research on different ways that you can do that. We're not going to repeat that now, but I want to go over a few of the best practices in case your community relies on event-based giving for part of its budget or its end of year fundraising. If you do an annual event, if you're used to doing this and it's a part of your budget, there's no reason why you can't move that event online this year. And over the past year and a half, I have seen all kinds of virtual events. I've seen talent shows where people like juggle or do a cooking demonstration on cam, and then people, like rate it, and the congregation can all be a part of it on Zoom. I've seen and participated in dinners where people get a common meal, maybe from a caterer, and they all open it up together and they eat it on Zoom and they talk and they have fellowship. Maybe they sell tickets to that so that people can experience that as a fundraiser. And I've seen all kinds of things bought and sold: auctions, bake sales, craft fairs, all those things that you can do in person. You can also find great ways to do it online. So if your church relies on this, don't forsake it just because it's more difficult for us to get together this year. There are ways that you can convert this pretty easily to an online event. And it doesn't have to cost a lot. All of you who registered for this today used Eventbrite to do so. And so your church can sell tickets or collect registrations through Eventbrite. It's free for you to set up, but if you sell tickets, Eventbrite will take a little fee for doing that off of each sale. That's how they make money. But this is one way for you to be able to sell tickets to a virtual event. You can promote it for free on your social media channels, your newsletter, your Facebook, your Twitter, your Instagram, hot air balloons, all the things that you might do to get the message out. Zoom is a tool that almost all of us are now familiar with, and you can run your event on Zoom and have a lot of fun doing it. You can use something like Tithely to connect text donations so that people can make a gift above and beyond the ticket price while they're doing it. And you can integrate auctions through eBay for Charity. eBay for Charity works just like eBay for everything else, only if you register as a charity, they don't take a transaction cost. You get more money going into your congregation if you use eBay for Charity and you register as a nonprofit. And then you can use their tool, which is robust for your own church's auction or silent auction. So consider this: if you do event-based fundraising, consider these virtual ways to connect online this year. I'm going to go through a couple more slides before I pull us back into our group and ask for some questions. I see that there's some stuff being put into the chat already. I want to address some of the challenges that we are facing as we enter more pandemic time together and continue to face the challenges of isolation and uncertainty. The first of those is how to talk about money when there's obvious economic fallout from pandemic-related unemployment or local economy shrinking or something like that. And the first is to remind us, and this is a reminder for every year, but it's good to be reminded of it, that there's no shame in a household pledging less this year than they did in other years. Every gift matters. We sometimes feel some kind of guilt if we can't make last year's gift, even when our economic circumstances change. And we feel some pressure to perform in our pledge campaigns because we deeply care about our communities and we want our churches to succeed. I believe that too, and I make stretch gifts, but we want people to make a gift that works for their household and not feel an unnecessary amount of pressure to do so. So please train your stewardship committees to know that that stewardship isn't a high pressure sales deal. This is an opportunity for people to connect and reflect on what they've received and be able to give back proportionately. It's good to remember that not everyone is experiencing the pandemic in the same way. Not every household is struggling, not every household is thriving. So it depends from based on what our careers are, based on what our exposure to economic vulnerabilities are. Not every household experiences it in the same way. Some of your members may not have gone on an expensive vacation this year, or may have not spent money on dining out or going to shows, and they may have more income to be able to give to their church this year or to other charitable purposes, while others have faced real struggle and real uncertainty. So keep that in mind. This is to remind us that it's still okay to ask people to make their best gift or to even increase as the church's needs have increased. Not everyone is struggling. Every conversation about pledges is a pastoral one. This is something I remind stewardship committees over and over again when I have the opportunity to train them or work with them. What I mean by this is that we put so much stuff on our money. It's not just about money in and money out and what we can do with it, but it's also about our retirement plans, our healthcare concerns, our children's education. Our society puts our visions of success and failure on money as well. And so there's psychological and emotional stuff that is attached to our money. This isn't a surprise to any of us, but it's to say that when we encounter a conversation in church about money, and we're talking about money and meaning, we may be getting more from our members about who they are and what they're feeling and what they're going through. And so we should be prepared for pastoral conversations. Those are treated with in confidence. Those are treated with respect. And you never know, I never know what kind of a conversation I'm going to get into when I talk with a potential donor about making a gift. They could share something deeply vulnerable in the process of the conversation that we're having. And those are beautiful, warm moments of ministry. It's a great opportunity also to make certain that our clergy and our fundraising in churches are connected in some way. And I know that different communities have different kinds of cultures around what the pastor knows and what the pastor doesn't know about stewardship. And I'm not wading into that one. But what I am saying is that you might put your list of people you're going to be calling or asking to join you in the campaign. You might put that in front of clergy to say, is there anything I should know? Is there anyone I shouldn't contact on this list? They might know something about what's going on in a household that you don't know. And so they might just be able to gently say, maybe not this year or whatever. Conversely, if you find something out in one of these conversations that, that surprises you, you might say, have you spoken with our pastor about that? Have you spoken with our vicar about that? And if they have or haven't, you might refer them to your priest and say, hey, you might want to check on this family. Something's going on there. And that's not about divulging confidence. That's not about breaking rank. That's about taking care of each other and making sure that we all know. I say all this to say, when we talk about money, we talk about a lot of our own stuff. It's good to remember also that we've had challenging economic times, even in our recent memory. So just because we're having a hard time now, we can remember back to the Great Recession, and we did get out of it, and we did rebuild, and things changed and came back in some ways. And so this too will pass. We will get through this just as we have other economic moments in our lives. Finally, it's likely that your church is doing more for your community now because communities need so much. So this is the time to really run robust stewardship campaigns and pledge campaigns to make certain that our budgets are able to serve our inner congregation and our outward neighbors and our friends. Let's also talk a little bit about how to talk about stewardship and your congregation when your congregation might be facing budget cuts or program cuts or even staff reductions due to uncertainty or some revenue loss. I know that a lot of congregations last year did fine in their pledge campaigns, and we're doing fine this year in pledge redemption. But where our congregations, including my own, have taken the biggest hit is in space rental, in the use of our space for things like preschools or nonprofits or office space. And that's real income for a lot of communities. And so there have been some challenging budgets to put together. So you might be thinking, well, how can we talk with our members about making their best gift to stewardship this year when we have to cut some programs or when we have to cut some money out of our budget? We don't want people to reduce their gifts. So how do we talk about what we are doing? I want to remind us that we don't just talk about money when we talk about our treasure. We talk about our mission. We talk about how we support the work of the church, and we put that first. Our mission is external, feeding our neighbors, caring for our communities, being present in our civic lives. It's also internal, pastorally, the way we care for each other, the way we call each other and take care of each other, drive each other to appointments, make food for each other, just call each other on the phone to say, how are you doing? That's also missional work of the church. So whatever your mission is, however many ministries you have, focus on those, not on the things that you have to cut or cut back on. So make it a positive, forward-focused conversation. Also, let's remember that there could be some members in your community that could make an extraordinary gift to cover unexpected shortfalls in the budget. You might be saving them for a future campaign. Oh, I'm going to ask them in 2 years or 4 years when we do this big campaign. Well, this might be the time to ask them for a gift. If you have a real budget shortfall and it's impacting ministry in some way, don't be afraid to ask those members that you've been holding on to make their best gift now. Finally, let's talk a little bit about how we discuss stewardship in times of uncertainty. Our times are often uncertain, and lots of things make us feel anxious or uncertain. And we've certainly had a lot in 2020 and 2021 to think about. But this is not new. This is not new to us as Christians. Certainly in our very earliest years, there was a lot of uncertainty around us. And so we have to remember that this has been with us throughout the journey of Christianity and throughout our own journeys in our own congregations and our own families. From ancient times to modern, we've figured out solutions for uncertainty. It's also good to remind people that you don't sign a pledge form in blood. This isn't a commitment that can't be broken or changed or renegotiated. And I think a lot of times, and this is based on some of the awkwardness or guilt we feel when we can't make a gift, but it's perfectly fine to renegotiate your pledge, to say, I thought I could do this, but my circumstances have changed. And so rather than just ignoring it or stopping payment altogether or feeling like I can't be present with you, I just am going to renegotiate it. These are the new expectations of what I can do. And helping people feel that that's a comfortable climate. It's always an awkward conversation, I get that, but it shouldn't have to be an impossible one. We should let our members know that it's possible to change a pledge once it's been made. And I think the most important thing is whatever your gift, Whatever your gifts of time, talent, and treasure, they matter. The church needs them. The church will use them the best way they can to do ministry in the world, and that making a gift, participating in the campaign is what's essential. I don't like it when, and it makes me sad when people say, I can't participate this year because they feel like they can't make a big gift. And I like to say, well, what can you do? We have to remember the widow's mite. We have to remember that copper coins make just as loud a clink into the box as a gold one does, right? So let's remember that all gifts are appreciated, all gifts are needed. A lot of times we need to create the space for difficult topics. And I want us to be able to remember that if we're doing our stewardship campaigns in small groups, or if we're doing them in forums, or if we're doing them one-on-one, that we need to keep people feeling good about the connection that they have with the people doing the campaign. So creating a safe place, nurturing all voices, giving space for those introverts among us to be able to say what they need to say. Keeping things positive. We're going to talk in a minute about appreciative inquiry as a tool to use when talking about our mission and our ministry. Keep things focused on what can be, the positive, what it would be like to have this happen in our budget. Talk about those beautiful dreams that we have. When we're running small groups, train your leaders to facilitate conversation. Train them to feel comfortable and be ready to accept the stories, the vulnerable stories that people want to share. Leaders don't have to have all the answers either. I feel like often when we ask our stewardship committee members to engage in conversation or small groups, lead small groups about the campaign, they say, well, what if somebody asks me a question about the budget I can't answer? I guarantee you someone will ask a question about the budget that you probably can't answer. And it's fine not to have an answer. It's fine to say, I'll do a little research, or here's who you can talk to about that, or I don't know, but let's find out together. Often we feel like we have to have all the answers in order to have the conversation. But I think that's a false narrative. We don't. All we have to do is be open to hearing what people are saying. There's lots you can control and lots you can't control when you're talking about money and meaning. You can control in your own world how prepared you are, how well you make the case. This is what we're raising money for this year. This is what we're doing with it. If you weren't a part of our last two webinars on designing your case statements and breaking through the pledge plateau, those were our July and August offerings. You can find those on our website. It's a lot of information there on how we make the case for mission and meaning, how we help people focus on our fundraising goals for the purpose of ministry. What you can't control is how interested your donors are in what you're doing, right? You hope that you make your best case. You hope that you get them motivated, but you can't control that. You can only influence it. You don't know what your members are facing. There are other financial commitments, either to other charities or to their personal lives or the things that are going on. And you can't control their well-being, their financial well-being, or their capacity, I would say. All you can do is ask them to join you in making their best gift and release yourself from the anxiety that some people won't be able to participate the way you hope that they would. A little quick tip, 97% of the time that people ask for gifts in church, the answer is yes. It's very rare in faith-based giving that your member says, no, I won't participate this year. They may say, I can't do what you're asking, and here's what I can do. They may have a different way to approach what you're asking them to do, but the answer is almost never no. So shake off that fear of rejection. You're likely not going to hear it in church. We are pretty loyal in our church giving. Finally, let's talk a little bit about appreciative inquiry. Appreciative inquiry is a tool we use, especially in small groups about stewardship, when we talk deeply about our relationship to the church, our feelings about the mission, how we inspire each other to give. And so appreciative inquiry asks exciting questions. It asks us to think about the good that's happening in the world. It purposely does not ask negatively framed questions. So an example of that isn't like, what would the community be like if the church closed? That's a fear-based negative question. Don't ask that, but instead say, what would it look like if we had the kind of budget that we could serve our community in this way? How would you feel about that? That unlocks our creativity, it unlocks our passion and our spirit for generosity. So ask some great questions. There are the reflection questions that we have in our weekly offerings, but then you can also drill down. What's your favorite ministry here? What gets you most excited? What would you love to see happen if you could enact any new program? What are the gifts that you have that you'd be willing to share? Are you a good singer? Are you a good baker? Do you really like fidgety budgets and fussing around with those sorts of things? Are you a great gardener? Can you lead a youth group? What are your gifts? What are your talents? And getting people to talk about what they love and what they do and what they can offer provide beautiful conversations to then say, will you join me in making a gift this year to the campaign to support our congregation? Finally, I want to go through, before we ask your questions, I want to go through a few scenarios on how you might make the ask for people to join in this year's campaign. And I want to start off by saying, I know that it's not easy to talk about money in church. It's my job to do it, and I've gotten lots of practice at doing it. But it wasn't a skill that came naturally. I had to learn it. I had to be taught it. I had to practice it. So your stewardship committee, they should be made up of folks who have a heart for stewardship, who feel like they can do this work, who feel like they can ask people to join in supporting the mission. A person who's on your stewardship committee who says, I can't talk about money, it really scares me, is probably a person that you should invite to do a different kind of ministry in your church, not one of stewardship. TENS ran a great webinar earlier in the year on recruiting and training a stewardship team. You can find that on our website and download it. It has amazing tips and tools on how to raise up leaders for stewardship in your congregation. But here are a few scenarios on words that you can use as a template. And you'll notice that the thing they have in common is that you're asking them to join you in making a gift. And this makes an assumption. The first gifts that should be raised in any church fundraising campaign are those of the leaders. Your clergy, your vestry, your stewardship team should be asked for and make their gifts even before the campaign starts, or certainly as soon as the campaign begins. They should be the first ones closed and booked and ready to go. This is for a couple of reasons. The first is that when we can say we have 100% participation from our leadership in the campaign this year, that signals to everyone else, okay, This is serious. People are paying attention. Our leaders are all involved and they're supporting this. It's really good for us to say we have 100% participation in our leaders. It's really negative when we have to chase down vestry members for their gift. Did you fill out your pledge form yet? We didn't see your pledge form come in. Could you please get it in? Your vestry should do that right away. And please make certain that that's part of the teaching that you give your vestry throughout the year. It might even be a part of the job description or the training that you do for your vestry as you recruit them onto the vestry. Remind them that they should be the first gifts. The other thing that it does is that it says, we can then say with authenticity, I've made my gift to the campaign. Will you join me in making yours? That is such a more warm and beautiful way to ask people to participate in the campaign than if we are asking them to participate and we haven't yet. So please, when you're running your campaigns, make certain that your leadership has first made their gifts before opening it up to everyone else. This is a really important tool. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment. I'm going to pull us back in to our conversation. I'm going to ask for your questions on challenges, ideas for running stewardship campaigns, questions about anything we've talked about. I'm also going to take a look at the chat and see what's come in since I've been reading. So please use the raise hand function in your reaction button to ask a question. And I see Kirby is ready to go. Kirby, unmute and ask your question.
Hi, Davey. Thanks so much for the information. It really is great. I've enjoyed what you've had to say, and I think it's very practical. These are practical things that we can implement. I just had a couple of kind of specific questions. One is, what's your feeling about publishing a list of pledgers, like in the bulletin or something? I know other nonprofits and schools and such do that. And in the past, it has promoted me to want to be on that list. But in a church environment, I don't know whether that would be considered appropriate or not, whether it be too shaming.
You know, I think it's about culture. So I realize that's a wishy-washy answer, but some congregations are really comfortable with that. And some want real privacy about how that information is shared. And so I would say, so first I'm going to offer an opinion. My opinion is it is great when we list the members who have made gifts, because I think it elevates the whole ministry of stewardship and it reminds people that their neighbors are doing this. If that is offensive in your community and there's real pushback for that, I think then it's okay to start talking about the number of gifts you've made, and then put it as a percentage, you know, so 100 households have made their gift this year to the campaign. That's 94% of us or something like that. So if there's real pushback about names, use the numbers and talk about it that way, because it's a similar result. What we're trying to say is we have high adoption. People support the ministry here, and so you can support the ministry here too. And that's really what we want. So you know your congregation and your community best, what they are and are not able to handle. And I respect that. I understand that there are reasons, some of them very old, some traditions about how we share information about who gives and who supports. The one thing I strongly recommend we never do is put a dollar amount next to a name. That should not happen in church. It's not like going to the symphony and looking at the donor wall. This is church, and so it's good enough to say, Davey made a gift this year. We don't have to know how much it was. Thanks for your question, Kirby, and it's great to see you. Alan, I see you've got a question. If you want to come off mute.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I really appreciate the forum, Dave. This is very helpful. My question is related to the multiple platforms for giving. and whether or not you find that you need different platforms or media to help communicate across different demographics, be they age or any other type of demographics.
I do find that, and that's one of the reasons why I suggest that if that you have more than one platform. You know, some people appreciate PayPal because it has big market adoption. It's a name we know, we trust it as much as we trust these things. And so, you know, PayPal is one way that a lot of congregations go. But then they might use something more boutique made for churches like Tithely or Vanco or Givelify or any of these other great church-based tools that people have. You know, there's always Zelle, and there's your bank check process, and all of the ways that people can make electronic transfers. And so I think when we have the capacity, if your church has the capacity to keep track of multiple monthly reports that would come in, and it wouldn't drive your treasurer or your parish administrator insane to be able to do that, the more options, the better, because different people do what they're familiar with, right? And so if we have an option up there that they already have used in some other part of their life, they're likely to feel that they can use it for church as well. So don't go overboard, because I think it would drive our congregations crazy if we have all of the options, but offer as many as you can. And then don't forget the other ways that people give, through retirement accounts, through securities. People are giving through, you know, their bank automated checks or ACH payments, things like that that you can automatically do. And this is another plug for online giving. The power of the recurring gift. PayPal and almost anything else allow you to slide that little button that says, I want to make this gift weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, quarterly, whatever frequency you determine. And that then automatically comes out of your bank or your debit card or whatever, and it goes right into the church, and you don't have to think about it all the time. It makes it easier for us. So I hope that answers your question. I'm really excited that so many churches are getting on board this year with online giving. Julie, I see you have your hand up if you want to come off mute and ask your question.
Hi there, everybody. Julie Strout from LaGrange, Texas. Two-part question. One is a broader question. We are using old Power Church software currently to track our donors. And then we have several other mailing lists and databases. So one of our challenges we're going to try to work on this year is getting a really good comprehensive list of members versus people that have been making donations, because they're not sort of melded up there together. So I was wondering if we're a small church, our ASA is about 110. And so do you have any recommendations of some products we could look at that are friendly with, say, QuickBooks software, or point me in some direction there?
Sure. Many of the options that are out there have an integration with QuickBooks ready to go, because QuickBooks is so common. I think the best one is PayPal. It's really easy to set up. It's free. It has a little automated tool that your treasurer would have access to, or you, the leadership, that integrates really well with QuickBooks, and it will reconcile what comes in online, kind of keep track of the transaction cost, and put it in a separate category as sort of a cost of doing business category or whatever you do, and kind of make it really easy for you.
Okay.
And it's also, to be perfectly frank, it's the best bang for the buck. It's 2.7% transaction cost is cheaper than everything else out there, even Tidely with our discount. It's probably your best tool.
Okay, we're using egiving.com, I think, for that. But then Power Church also offers the ability to track actual people and the history of their giving throughout the year, create reports. So our accountant is complaining about how antiquated that is. And she's even also having to create a separate report for different types of donations that fall outside of the pledging. She's having to create a spreadsheet for thank you notes and stuff. So we're really looking to upgrade that to some modern software.
Okay, well, that's yet another thing. So which one are you using now, did you say?
Power Church.
And that isn't providing you the robust report that you need?
I think it's that it's so old. It's just a very old version, and maybe we just need to upgrade our Power Church. I didn't know if that's still sort of the gold standard.
It's a standard, and I think they do have an upgrade that gives you more opportunity to run the kinds of reports you're talking about that takes different funds and accounts for them in different ways. That ability to track a donor over time is really helpful in being able to analyze our pledge trends and take a look really at how people are giving, in over 3 years or over 5 years. So I really like a tool like that, and I think maybe you just need to upgrade.
Okay.
If not, there are other ones out there, but if you're using one, you've already invested in it, just get the upgrade patch.
Okay, great. And then my second part of my question is, I mentioned we're an ASA of 110. We currently, our committee is really 2 of us. I'm senior warden, and then I'm the person that stands up at 10:30. And then we have another person as a co-chair that handles the early service. How would you augment the process you shared with us in your slides? For instance, should we still consider a larger committee to handle things like reaching out and making phone calls to people that aren't going to be getting an email? For little churches, where would you augment what you shared with us?
Well, I think that's a really useful question. Thank you. Obviously you've got the numbers that you have, right? And so you can't create more people, and you can't populate committees just for the sake of populating them. But I think 2 is a pretty small number for the kind of importance that stewardship plays in the role of the church. And so if you are going through a period where you're trying to contact as many folks as you can, and you just imagine dividing that up between 2 people, that's a lot of time that you have to do it. So what would that look like if you increase that to 4 and you doubled the amount of calls you could make with half the, with fewer of your own less of your own time being spent doing it. So I think that 2 is pretty small. And I say that because our campaigns are really important. And I know they're also hard to staff because it's work that we're not all called to, and it's work that is intense. And it has some baggage attached to it, right? It's talking about money. So not everyone is called to do that. But I think that it's such an important committee and such important work for the thriving of our congregations that we should invest a few more people than 2 in it, because I think it makes 2 people responsible for a whole lot of work, and sharing that burden and making it a joy would be really, I think, important. So think about that, but work with who you've got. So if you need to scale your communication differently, email allows you to send out a blast, and you can send it as frequently as your list will allow. So you can have some more frequent messages that go out. And if you're using like constant contact or something like that, where you can fill in the field name, so it says Dear Davey and not dear, valued member. But, it's really important if you can do that. It makes it feel a little bit more personal. And that's a way to automate that communication if you really only have a small number of people to do that. And then focus your phone calls on the folks that are really significant. Like, we know that this gift is really important to us, so maybe we'll make sure that they get a phone call, or save it for your follow-up campaign for chasing down those pledge forms that won't come in even though the campaign's done, and spending your time that way. So I get it. Time is a non-renewable commodity. So we have to do what we can with it. I appreciate your question and the honesty of that question. We got to do what we do with the people that we have. Wayne, you've got a question, so come on off mute, please.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is the Reverend Wayne Fletcher from Grambling, Louisiana. And I've got a really, and I was going to say small church until I heard Julie speak, and now I guess I have to go to the tiny church designation. And we have a very small congregation. I'm sure the COVID hasn't helped because people haven't come back yet, but we also have an older congregation that really does not take to email, Facebook, or all the fun stuff that you mentioned that would make life a heck of a lot easier. And so even in terms of talking with them, I'm also new to this church, and I've only been there about 6 or 7 months, and I'm still learning them. And they are not into pledging, for lack of a better way of saying it. In other words, they've gotten into some very bad habits before I got there, and whatever emergency, has come along, some very generous donor has come along and rescued, the church in years past. And I'm trying to get them or wean them off of that. And so I'm asking, I guess, in a way of how to best do something like that. And so I'll be glad to listen to your response.
Thank you for that question, Wayne. And thanks for sharing that. And I think that's not just a tiny congregation problem. I bet that there are big congregations that are facing a similar problem or challenge. Let's call it a challenge. So you're not going to probably change that bad practice overnight. But I think that there are ways through formation, and adults are formed as well, and that's not just kids. So our Christian formation goes on. I think throughout the year, there are ways to elevate ideas like abundance, generosity, gratitude, to get people thinking in that spirit, so that I like to say the pledge campaign shouldn't come as a shock every year. Oh, it's that time of year, and we tense up and we go through this thing, right? It should be a little bit more, this is a part of our life. It's on the church calendar like everything else is. We can see it coming and we prepare for it, just like we start preparing for Easter right after Christmas. We prepare for pledge season as well throughout the year. So TENS released a webinar earlier in the year called Year-Round Stewardship Formation. I commend that to you. It's great. And I'm also going to suggest some book studies throughout the year where you can pull small groups together to raise the awareness of generosity and abundance. And this will answer another question that came in the chat. What books should we recommend for this? And I have some ideas, but I'm first going to invite my friend Charles Cluen, who I see is on the call, who has some very good ideas on books that we might use in small group formation for stewardship. Charles, do you want to answer that question and maybe help Wayne answer his question too?
Well, thank you. One is Henry Nouwen's fundraising book. It's a small book. You also get a workbook. You can get it from Amazon. A wonderful book to give your stewardship committee, kind of let them realize that fundraising in church is God's work. It's God's work. That's a book I highly recommend.
Could you say the title again?
Fundraising.
It's called The Spirituality of Fundraising by Henry Nouwen.
I shouldn't do this, but also recommend my book, which is called 1 Minute Stewardship, Creative Ways to Talk About Money in Church, which talks about year-round stewardship. And it's based on first principle, if you remember nothing else I say today, 6 words: thank you, thank you, thank you. No one ever left your church because they felt thanked and appreciated. Secondly, you need to tie people's giving week by week into your vision and your ministries. So constantly thank people for the altar guild, for the flower guild, for the ushers, for the choir, and tie into the fact that their giving makes it possible. You're not asking for money, you're just thanking them and letting them know what good things your money are doing. And that's terribly important, connecting their giving week by week or bi-weekly to the wonderful programs your church is doing, as well as done in the diocese by your bishop. People have to feel good about their giving and appreciate it. Cliff Christopher also has another book called Not Your Parents' Offering Plate,
It's a good one.
which talks about how things have changed over this time.
Yeah, that's a great book too. Charles, thank you. I knew I could count on you to have some good titles, and I appreciate that. TENS also has a stewardship bibliography. You can find it in our resource library in the formation section. We have a bibliography for adult formation, and we have a bibliography for teaching children and teens about money and financial practices. And they're big lists, and they talk a little bit about what those, some options for you. So there's a lot on this topic because, church charitable giving is 31% of giving across America. It's the largest chunk of giving to charities in the United States. And so a lot of people are spending a lot of time talking and writing and thinking about churches. And so I think this is great. Lots of options for you. So thank you for that question. Eric asks a question in the chat. Eric's a data guy. I can tell it, and I love it. So he asks us to think about how we provide an approximate estimate of how the distribution of gifts relates to the estimated income level in my area. So I haven't seen exactly that data, and I think it probably exists, but I need to do a little research to find it out. I referenced a 2019 study from the Lake Institute, and I quoted just a couple of statistics. The study is really thick, and it goes into regions, and it goes way deep into demographics, and it talks about regional giving trends. And it talks a little bit about income levels, although as we've seen, even zip code data and that kind of stuff isn't always the predictor of household income that it used to be. But so it's a little more challenging, but there is some data out there from the Lake Institute if you take a look at their website. And TENS will do a little bit more research on this and release some work on it, because I think it's really important, and I appreciate that. You also say that your impression is that few people are giving more than 1% of their income, which suggests that few people accept the idea of proportional giving. And I think you're right on that. Church giving in its most generous is about 2.1%. And that's, that's at sort of the highest level for what a lot of people are giving. which is not the 10% that we talk about, right? And so part of that, I think, is that the church doesn't preach the tithe anymore. I think we have gotten away from that expectation. And because so many people were missing the mark, I think it became uncomfortable for church leaders and for stewardship leaders to continue talking about the tithe as a place to go or a place to start. And so I think just honestly, we need to think about that again. We need to be realistic and understand that you can't go from 1% to 10% in 1 year. That would be such a shock to your financial system that it would be unrealistic. But how do we talk about growing proportionately? And so last month, we did a webinar called Breaking Through the Pledge Plateau, which really talked about how do we analyze data, look at trends, and help people to think about increasing when they can. And using those tools, using a pyramid of giving where you can see how much the top percentage gives to the church budget versus the big base, which gives smaller gifts, or looking at the steps. This is a great tool for saying we have 5 households that are giving at 500 and we have 10 households giving at the $1,000-ish level. And you don't see names attached to it, but you can start to put people in chunks and people can see, oh, this is what my gift would look like if I raised it up or stepped it up a little bit. This year on the reverse side of the TENS pledge cards in the materials that you can download, we have the table of proportional giving broken down by annual salary and then sort of weekly available income. And it breaks it down from 15% to 1%. So you can see, what percentage, have a real dollar amount. I think another answer to this, Eric, is that we have to give people a place to start. One of the questions I hear a lot is, what should we tell newcomers about that have never pledged before, or people who are, new to this idea? How do we help them pick the right starting pledge? Because they might start at $500 and think that that's a big gift because they've never made it before. And maybe your church average pledge is $2,200. So you might say right up front, this is what our church is like. This is what average gift size looks for us. You make your best prayerfully considered gift, but here's a place to start. And I think kind of providing that average gift size, or certainly median gift size, is even better because it flattens that out a little bit and it takes some of those outlying gifts into consideration and really starts to look at what's that middle level of giving. That's a really honest percentage or a really honest number of what a reasonable gift per household might be. So I think we need to do more formation. That's all to say, we need to do more formation on what's appropriate and what's needed. Finally, we have to give people the reason to give money to church. We have to remind them that every dollar has a mission purpose, that we are funding the mission of the church, and use tools like narrative budgets that spread fixed costs like salaries and buildings and utilities across and drop them down into ministry categories. So like, a part of your priest salary is spent on youth ministry, 100% of your youth minister, this much utility, this much of the building, this much of your program costs. And then you're dividing your budget up into ministries and not into line items. And that now starts to help members see, oh, when I make my gift, it's all going to ministry. Whereas when we look at a line item budget, we're like, oh, it's going to the light bill, and that's very much less interesting than families or outreach or worship or the other things that our churches actually spend their money on. So those are a couple of ideas, but I love your invitation to do more data research. Thank you for it.
Thanks again, Dave. I was just going to put in the chat, but I really appreciate your answer to all that. It really resonates pretty deeply with, I think, the direction we need to go with our stewardship campaigns. And I haven't been involved in our church's stewardship before, but I've worked in other settings where I think data can make a difference in reframing the decisions that people make. And if you don't give them any point of reference, then you, I think, are missing opportunities.
Yeah, I think you're right, Eric. We're asking people to make really important gifts to do really important work. And that means that we need to get better as church about asking for that money and give them the tools they need to be able to do it. So the line item budget sits next to the narrative budget, sits next to your case statement, and maybe some documents like the steps tool or a pyramid tool or average gift size. You know, we need, the more information we provide, the more people can make an intentional, thoughtful gift. So thank you for that. Some more hands have been raised. I saw Kirby and then Alan and then Carol. So Kirby, you want to come off mute? Thank you.
Sure. I was at a church one time that did specific amount requests for some of the higher givers. For instance, if someone's giving $8,000 a year, then the senior warden said, you know, we really appreciate your gift of $8,000, but we'd like you try to do a stretch and give us $10,000 this year. So it was really specific. What are your thoughts on that?
So nonprofits have been doing this for a long time, right? If you support the zoo with an annual donation, it might, when you get your letter this year, it might say, hey, Davey, thank you for your gift of $50 this year. Can you make $150 this year? Right? So nonprofits are certainly doing this. But in church, we say, no, nobody could possibly know what I'm giving.
Right.
I don't want anyone to know that. And so there's some culture education there. Again, I go back to what's the culture in your community? If they will accept that and not be offended by that, I think it's very powerful when we can do that. One year in my own congregation, we wrote out letters and there was a blank spot in the thank you for last year's donation of, and only one person had that data. And so they were the ones that put in that number. Nobody else saw it on the stewardship committee. And then when you got the letter, it said, you know, thank you, Davey, for your gift of this much. And it was a little reminder. Oh, that is what I gave last year. Oh, you know, but it wasn't like this is common knowledge. There are lots of ways that different communities handle this. I think it's such an important question though. And I really like it. As a fundraiser, I think it's really important that we acknowledge what people gave and what we're asking them to give. But if your community will be up in arms about that, you know better than I. But there are some ways to do it, I think. Thanks for that question, Kirby. Hi, Alan, you've got a question?
Hi. Yeah, just real quick. So I really appreciated the last webinar you did and the pyramids and the steps and all that other stuff. What tools were used to create the pretty charts and graphs? Do you know?
I drew them in PowerPoint.
Drew, okay. That's all I need to know.
Yeah, and I'm not much of an artist.
No, they came across very well. I didn't know if there was a canned program, so PowerPoint's good enough. Thank
There
you.
probably is somebody out there doing it. But that's a good question. If somebody knows the answer to that and is using a template for things like giving pyramids and steps, please put it into the chat because it seems like we could all use it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, if you don't mind, I'm going to borrow your work.
Great. Yes, please. It's
right.
Freely offered.
Great. Thank you.
Carol.
Hello, it was a great webinar today. You were saying earlier, when somebody may be a new pledger, that you talk about the average pledge. And a webinar or two ago, you talked about how skewed an average can be. So what is your suggestion in terms of that?
Thank you for remembering what I said. Am I holding me accountable for it? So that's why I said the median gift is an even more useful number than
Okay.
average gift size. Average gift size takes the $10,000 outlier gift that your parish might get and the, you know, the $0 gift that somebody's giving, and it figures it in. But when you look at a median gift, it's usually a little lower number, but it's more representative of the kinds of giving that happen in your congregation. So that's just another, Excel can do that for you. It can, if you don't remember how to calculate a median, I don't, Excel does, and so it'll do it for you and help you understand what your median level gift is. And it's just a more useful tool because it's more honest, it's more representative.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I love talking about math in the morning. Any other questions? These are great. Thank you for so many of them. Is everyone ready for their pledge campaign to launch? I hope that you are using the TENS resources this year. And I realize we are at almost the end of our time. And so I'm just going to, when you get an email from me later today, I'm going to make sure that you have the link to download the TENS materials and the password that you'll need to be able to access it. It is a ready to go stewardship package that has sample letters. It has pledge cards in it. And those pledge cards don't just have your gifts of treasure, but they also ask you, you know, have you made or planning on making a planned gift? Have you thought about a legacy gift? Are you making your gift through securities? Are you using your retirement accounts? Those are really important things to put on a pledge card. When somebody's giving through their retirement account, or a donor advised fund, for example, they're often making you a grant, not a pledge. And so your letter has to change slightly to them. So knowing what kind of a gift they're going to make or when it's going to come in, I'm going to make a stock gift. It'll come at the end of the year. This helps you and your treasurer plan for your year ahead. So download our sample pledge cards. We have prayers of the people that you can use for your stewardship campaign. We even have a hymn. I don't see him on today's call, but we have a fan who's very talented in Los Angeles, comes out of the Diocese of Los Angeles, who for 2 years now has written a custom hymn for our pledge campaign. This year's is called Every Perfect Gift, and you can download it. And it has the sheet music. There's even a sample so you can give it to your church musician and say, this is what it sounds like. So take a look at it. Who knows? The more we can put out there that we are doing something special this year for our campaign, the more adoption we'll get in having great gifts. We're asking all of our members to participate and make their best gift this year. If there are no other questions, I'm going to release you to your Saturdays and hope that you have a beautiful day. I really have appreciated being with you this year in these webinars. We're done for the year. We're going to let you have a break in October and November to run your campaigns, but we'll be back next year with a whole new set of webinars for you to join and ways to deepen your stewardship formation. I can't thank you enough for spending your Saturday with me today. So thank you. Have a beautiful campaign, raise lots of money and have lots of fun doing it. It's going to be good this year.
Many thanks, Dave.
Goodbye, friends.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thanks. Good to see you.